If you're frightened of spiders, look away now. Some lovely follower called Fama has asked me to do a spider tutorial. So here we go. I've done 3 different ones because there's so many variations that I've done over the years that I'm going to show you the very simple one going on to the more complicated or longer version. So this is the very simple one. I call it the blob spider because all you need is one glass blob, or it could be a pottery. So it's just like a flat back. It could be a cabochon. It could be, it could be semi-precious stone. But I've got these glass pieces which are perfect for this type of design. So what I do, I cut 4 lengths. They're about 4 inches, I suppose, roughly for this size of blob. And just making sure that they're all roughly the same size. And I straighten them all out. So those are going to be the legs. And then I cut a length of 0.4 millimeter silver plated weaving wire. And that is going to be wrapped and bound tightly around the center of those 4 lengths. And those wires are 0.8 millimeter or 20 gauge silver plated copper. But really any wire will do. You can see I've got some spiders with black legs. That's iron wire. So really any wire will do as long as it will sort of hold up and it won't fall apart. And once you've got the middle bit bound, start separating the wires out so that you've got the legs of the spider showing it. You don't have to be too accurate at this stage. Just separate them out so you can sort of see them splayed out. So again, it's very much like making a star, isn't it? And then you don't have to do this, but if you've got leftover binding wire, you can use that to sort of carry on binding between the gaps, and that just reinforces this whole structure. So this is the leg structure. And also, if you've run out of wire with that middle binding, just cut another piece and start again and carry on doing this. So this binding really is going to be where you're going to glue your glass blob onto. So you do want to give it a little bit of, you want to have something to glue onto. So I just do a little bit. You don't have to do too much to make a base. And keep pushing it in towards the center so there's no gaps. Keep it as close as you can together. So I'm just going to use up this wire that I've got here, and then I'll decide on if I need any more. The amount you weave is really dependent, and it really doesn't have to be very neat because you're not going to see it, on the piece that you're gluing on top of it. So if it was a larger flat back cabochon or something, then obviously you want to make the legs longer and you want to put a bit more binding. So I'm going to finish here, cut off the excess, flatten it down, and then all I need to do is just give it a little tap hammer to flatten it, and then it's ready for a base. There we go. That's nice and flat, it's work hardened. The legs aren't going to go anywhere. And then I'm going to decide where I'm going to bend each of the legs so for it to stand. So I'm using my ruler. What you could do is you can always cut a little bit of wire to use as a measure. But I'm going to go round, and with my tips of my chain nose pliers, I'm trying to, roughly bend. I'm going sort of just about, I think it's about 15 millimeters on. So, 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters on. And really it's all dependent again on what you're gluing. on your base for the body of the spider. So go around, and then that gives you the bend of the legs, and then you want to also, you can leave it like that, but I prefer to also bend the feet out and then hammer them. So I'm just spreading the legs to a sort of position that I would want to have them. I can just check with one of these glass blobs here. And you can use these little stick-on eyes. You know, you can get them from craft stores. See these little googly eyes? Those are fun to put on top of the glass blob to give it a bit of character. I mean, these spiders are just great for, you know, young children, and young children can make them. So, or you could have those flat back diamante sort of crystals that sparkle, or you could have these little round pieces. You could make jump rings and then glue those on. So anything goes for the eyes, and then I'm bending the very ends of each of the legs to make the feet, and I'm just using the length of my flat-nosed pliers as a measure for that. So go round to each one. You could make a loop instead of, if you have cut too much wire and it looks too high, you could make a loopy loop as well. And now I'm going to hammer and spread the ends of the wire. That work hardens them and sort of mushrooms them out, and it makes them feather out. So that's going to be a nice base for it to sit on. Obviously you wouldn't make this for a small child because of the wires. But you can see how that works. You glue that base on and then glue the little eyes on, and that is it. You just spend a bit of time moving the legs around. So it's such a fun thing to make, and it's super easy. So that's my number one simple spider. This is the one I make probably the most, the two-bead spider. And I call it a two-bead because it has a bead for the body and a bead for the head. Now I'm using 0.6 millimeter wire, and I'm cutting 8 4-inch legs for the 4-inch wires for the legs. So there you have it, 4 lengths of 0.6. And now I'm cutting 0.4 binding wire to bind the center. You've seen me do this before. I'm just going to bind all of those wires in the center. You don't have to worry too much if it bunches up. You don't have to keep them all nice and flat this time. So when they are nice and tight and held in place at the center, again, split them up, create the spaces where the legs are going to be. So one by one, pull them apart so you can get them ready to feed your leg beads onto. And this is where bugle beads, if you've got any bugle beads lying around, these are perfect for legs. Otherwise you can just put lots of seed beads on in patterns. So now I'm going to get rid of my binding wires. So I've got 2 lengths still left there of the 0.4 millimeter gauge, and I'm just curling them around, and I'm going to cut them off and neaten up the ends because I don't want them to get in the way of the 0.6 mil legs. I've done 0.6 mil. I tell you why, because my bugle beads and my seed beads don't thread on to the 0.8. If you do have beads that thread on, use 0.8 because that's much stronger. So there's no rules to this. Really, any wire will do. It's dependent on whether you can thread your beads onto the wires. So here we go. Start off with whatever pattern you want. I'm going to put a large bugle, and then I like to put 2 seed beads, and that tells me where I'm going to bend the wire down. It's almost what I call the knee of the spider. And then the rest is just decorative. So, you know, you can decide to put a smaller little bugle bead there. No, I've still got quite a lot of wire. I think I'll carry on with the larger ones. You see how quick it is when you've got these large bugles. I mean, the threading goes so quickly. And with the very, very ends, I just make it like a little head pin and spiral the wire up to the last bugle bead or the last bead you've put on. And that holds everything in place. So you can see the stalk is made. So you carry on doing that for all 8 legs. And of course you can alternate colours. You could have, you know, the 2 front one colour and the 2 back another colour and the middle one's another colour. Just use your imagination and use whatever you've got to hand. So do that to all of them, and then once we've done that, we'll be ready to carry on creating the spider. So once you've done all the legs, you'll be bending them from where those 2 beads go down. You can see how that works. And you'll also be bending the tiny little spirals at the end, the head pin spirals. They will help sort of stand it. So I've moved on, so you don't have to watch me laboriously threading all those beads on. So now I'm using 0.8mm gauge, and I'm working from the spool, and I'm spiraling the end. This is going to be the wire that's going to go through the body of, this is the first body bead. Can you see that's the body bead? So I'm just going to centralize that spiral a little bit to the hole, the bead hole there at the back. So that's the body of the spider. Then I'm using 0.4 to bind those legs on, and then I'll end up with a head bead. So you just put them in order like that. So first of all, bind the center of that wire you've just cut of 0.4, then bind it onto this stem wire that has the body bead on. Don't worry that it's not sitting close to that bead, because you can push it down later. It's very difficult to bind it on when it is close because you haven't got much room. So just spend a bit of time binding it round, and you can always use that, you know, you've got 2 ends of wire there. You can always use that to go in between some of these legs. That reinforces the legs too. Means they're more secure. Means they don't wiggle around so much. So there's no sort of method to this. It's just, you know, over the years when I made them, I found it sort of, all these little reinforcements really help. And I'm just using up the other wire now because I've got these 2 working wires. When you've done enough of the sort of binding and it feels quite, you know, strong and it's on, you can twist them together, the 2 ends together, if you've still got any left over, and that secures them as one. And you want to bring it nice and tight. So I'm using my pliers now so that the twist goes right up close to the legs. There it is. And you can cut off any sort of excess. And you can make a spiral with that. So I didn't have much left, but this just finishes it off. A little bit of a spiral that flattens and hides all my workings. So now I'm going to bring those legs right up close to the body bead at the back of the spider. You can see how that all sits together. And then I'm going to thread on the head bead. and I'm going to push everything close up together. So now there are lots of things you can do. You can just end it there, make a loop or a head pin. Or if you've got lots and lots of wire like me left over, you can sort of curl it round the outside of the head bead and bring it underneath and then around the back. It just, all these things sort of reinforce it. And because I've still got a stem left, instead of cutting it off, I could make that into a larger spiral that sits either on the back body bead or in the middle above the where the legs are. Just remember that any wires left over you can spiral, and they just add a little bit more decor or decoration or interest to your pieces. And if you don't have them left over, well, you might not need it, or you just add another wire in. So I'm spiraling this and bringing it right in so that it sits right in the middle, hides all my workings. You could always glue a little flat back diamante on top of that to give it a bit more sparkle. And then you need to spend a bit of time bending the legs into shape. So that always, you know, takes a while to get the shape that you want, make it look a bit more realistic. And then don't forget to bend the little end spirals up right angles to the bugle beads on the legs. And you can see how that sits on a flat surface just by putting it on your block. So spend as long as you want on this. These are the ones I make most often, and they are always, you know, very popular to sell because they're so decorative. And the last one I'm going to show you, which is the first spider I ever designed actually. I call him the BRAMBLEBUM. So this is 0.6mm wire because that's the only wire that will fit my little seed beads. And I create a spiral. So I've probably cut a good, I don't know, 20 or so inches. And I've created this spiral. And then I'm going to feed my little seed beads all around the spiral. So they go round and round and round. So I have to push them all the way to that sort of that little inner circle. So this is why I'm saying it's the most complicated one, because it's fiddly. You're going to be threading lots of seed beads. But if you like seed beads, this is a lovely project to do. So I've pulled out my spiral a bit because it helps me feed the beads on. And carry on. You'll see why I call it a BRAMBLEBUM, because it looks like a bramble. It definitely has a blackberry look to it. It's like a little fruit. But it's like making a cage. It's a beaded cage. That's ultimately what we are making. So feed all the beads on. And the reason I'm not using 0.4mm for this is it's just a bit too flimsy. 0.6 still will, you know, thread the beads, but it's not too flimsy. So there, I've done my main spiral, and now I'm just feeding it right up to the end, but I'm leaving just a bit of a tail. It's just under an inch. And then I'm going to make a little circle, tiny circle, and then curl that into a tight spiral. And before I go too close to my threaded beads, I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, because now I'm going to continue with my fingers spiraling around that little tight spiral, because this is going to be like a beaded cage, you see. So it needs a spiral on each end to create the sort of cage bit of the back of the spider. So this is the body of the spider, but it's a beaded body. I'm just spending a bit of time getting the shape right. And you do have to do that. You know, you can twist it again to tighten it a little bit. So spend a bit of time getting the shape right. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, I've got a fly flying around, and it's just so so ironic because I'm making a spider. So there's the back of the bramble bit of the spider. It's the back of the spider, the body of the spider. And now, using the 0.6mm wire again, I'm going to cut the legs. So again, about 4 inches, and I need 8 of those. And the reason, again, I think I've told you with the other projects, I use 0.6 a lot, is because I can't thread these small beads with the 0.8. If you're using chunkier beads, larger hold beads, use 0.8 because the legs will be much firmer. But because I'm using thin bugle beads and all sorts. So again, this is 0.4 to bind the center, hold them all together, to bunch them up. So the legs are all very similar for all of them. It's just getting them all bunched up, binding around the center, gripping them in place, and I'm just going to twist these two ends together where they meet. That secures them. So I've got a twisted stem, and then actually what I can do, that twisted stem, is wrap that around the center just to finish it off. So just bring that around. And that holds all those wires together in the middle. So now we're ready to start thinking about how you're going to decorate the legs. You're going to use bugle beads, you're going to use seed beads, whatever beads you have to hand. So I'm just checking because mine look a bit longer on one side than the other. So I'm just going to trim one end a little bit to even it out. So if I hold it in the center, again, I'm going to separate each of the wires ready for threading. So separate them out, fan them out. And now choose whatever beads you want. I've got some nice twisted bugle beads for these. They're sort of like petrol-y blue, different colours in them. For a jeweled spider, I think it looks good. Again, I like to put 2 seed beads on for what I call the knees of the spider. And then I'm just filling up the gaps. So you just continue doing whatever beading you want and make the legs as jeweled as you want it to be. So there's my finished leg frame, and you can see I've made the spirals at the end to hold the beads on, and that's ready now. And I've got all my pieces ready to thread onto. That's my head bead there. 0.8 is going to be the central wire, but I'm starting off with a head pin, so I'm going to make a little hook, grip that tightly, make a tight spiral. So this is going to be at the end of the BRAMBLEBUM spider. So I'm just centralizing the wire on that spiral. So I brought it down the back of the middle, and now I'm going to bend it up at a right angle. So I grip it in the center and then bend the wire up, and that gives me my head pin. So I'm just straightening this wire that's going to go through the body. So now I'm ready to start threading. Just make sure it's nice and firm, and you're going to pick up the end of the body, the beaded body. You can see the beaded spirals. That's going to go there. Then we've got to connect the legs. So it's always in that order. We use the 0.4mm binding wire again. Connect that to the center of the leg frame. And you're going to bind that to the stem wire. And again, you don't have to bring it really close at this point because you can push it close later. Just bind it on. And you can go in between the legs as well. That helps reinforce it so it doesn't sort of flop around too much. I'm not being super tidy with this because I just really want to show you the technique, but you know, please take your time when you're, making a beautiful jeweled spider. I know someone who loves these to hang on their Christmas tree, but I like them for Halloween. And it's also quite fun just to put them in a, like on someone's desk. I don't know, just put them in places that, because they are decorative, but I know a lot of people hate spiders, so it's not to everyone's taste. I like them because they get rid of flies. So I'm again connecting the two ends of the 0.4mm binding wire, cutting off any excess, and then I can spiral that twisted remaining projecting wire down. Just make a little spiral and sit it over the workings of the top of the legs. And that can be flattened down. There we go. And then we've only got to think about the head bead. So that can go on next. And that goes right up there. And now you've got to think about how do you want to do the ends. You could make a loop at the ends. I'm just putting the legs down so they're not in the way when I'm finishing off. And I'm just checking I'm not squeezing the beaded body. You can put a bead inside that beaded body to hold it in that shape as well. So all I've done to finish off is just make a little loop at the end of the head bead, and you can hang it from there with a jump ring to put on a key ring or something like that. So that's it. That's the BRAMBLEBUM spider. And so now I've shown you 3 different variations. You've got this one, you've got the 2-bead, which is probably the most popular one, and then there's the very simple blob spider. So I hope that you've enjoyed watching this Fama and that you can create your own versions. Thank you for watching.